Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. It's time for our monthly visit with City Hall. Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here, and he's brought along some very special guests. So for the first half hour or so, we're going to have an interesting discussion about a rededication. With that, we welcome Mayor Vruwink, and I'll let you do the honors of introducing your special guest. Good morning, sir.
Well, good morning, Carl, and good morning to our listeners. You know, we try to bring special guests on our show to inform our listening audience, about the various aspects of which City Hall gets involved. And this is a unique project, I would say very unique in the sense of once in a lifetime for my administration to be a part of such a fun project. I think, it's very rare that this would ever occur in our city's history. So I brought two special guests with us. Our listeners probably know one or both of them. We've got Jerry Feith, and Paul Gross, who make up two of the three legs of the Memorial Clock and Bell Tower Committee. And so, folks, these individuals had been a part of the original Clock and Bell Tower Committee that really brought about that landmark and historic piece of architecture and city history into Mead Rapids View Park downtown. Many have probably noticed, if they've been looking up at the clock tower as they've passed by it, it's been missing its hands for some time. Back in, I believe, in 2014, these folks, as the city identified some necessary maintenance to the tower, and so these folks stepped back up to the plate to be a part of a complete refurbishment and renovation. But there's a bit of history, and I'll let these folks maybe talk a little bit about that.
I'm going to welcome both of you, and then I got to step out real quick and start a computer, but congratulations on a magnificent job. Where did you want to begin on the fixing up of the clock tower?
Well, this is Jerry Feith. First of all, thank you, Mayor, for having us here. We're happy to talk about the clock tower, and it has been a long process just to get the clock tower refurbished. Paul, do you want to talk about how that started?
The clock was initially in the old City Hall and Fire Station, which was located at the junction of First and Baker Streets. I believe that was about 1892 when the clock was installed in that building. And then when they built the new City Hall and we're going to tear the building down, I was looking at that and I thought, what's going to happen to that clock? And so one Sunday I went over there with a friend of mine, and the building wasn't locked or anything. Anyone could have walked in there and run away with the place, but there was nothing in it to run away with. So anyway, we climbed up to the top, and I looked at the clock, and I thought, well, this thing, there's nothing wrong with it. And I cranked up the weight, started the clock, and it ran just fine. So I set the clock. And then I thought, now we've got to get the bell going. If people hear this bell going, maybe somebody will wake up and say, hey, we don't want to throw this thing away. Well, the wire going to the bell clapper was very rusty, and it had broken. So I jimmied around there and got the thing tied back up, and we went down and stood in the street and waited for this strike to happen. The clock went by the hour, it didn't strike. We went back up and looked, and the rusty wire had just broken again, so we couldn't alarm anybody that way. But I brought the subject up, and we kind of started dealing with it a little bit, and there were people that were interested, and some that said, well, so what, you know how that goes, that's always...
Sure.
So I ended up, I thought, well, in any case, that pendulum is made of wood, and it's about 7 feet long. And I thought, that darn pendulum is going to get broken. I know how these things happen when they start removing equipment from old buildings. So I took the pendulum off, and I took it home and put it in my garage. And I waited until they took the clock out of there. And then I took it over to City Hall and put it with the clock. And years later, when we went back, when the restoration was, at the time came to get the clock and pendulum out of there, I went over there to the garage. Sure enough, the pendulum was broken in half. So that was part of the initial restoration.
Okay.
I'm going to let Jerry pick it up from there.
Okay. So then after that, what happened?
Well, the clock was restored and it was placed in. We built a tower.
Right. I remember that construction project.
And that process took a long time also, just to raise the money and so forth. The tower, by today's standards, I was looking back at the numbers on that, and I was surprised at the contract amount. The precast tower itself, this is not including the foundation base, but the precast tower was only $53,000. And I know that the tower today, in today's world, would be at least double that if you could get it built. But Advanced Cast Stone out of Random Lake built the thing and trucked it over and erected it. They erected it in something under a week. And interestingly, the tower itself weighs about 90 tons, and that top cap that sits on top of the dial house, that's 5 tons. So we're building a kind of a fact sheet that will be interesting, and that those sorts of things are on it. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that back in 1892, when the clock was purchased, for the initial or for the original clock tower, it cost between $700 and $800.
Really?
Yeah. So we were talking to the Rory DeMessi, who is from Mechanical Watch and Supply, and he's the person who completely restored this clock to factory condition, and it is beautiful. It was on display in the library for a few weeks, and I hope a lot of people saw that.
I did.
But I was talking to him, and he said that the clock nowadays, and he knows a lot of collectors, would be about $120,000. So it's not an invaluable object at this point.
Well, but it's a real treasure for the city.
Oh, it is.
And it's
Absolutely.
iconic. It's become an iconic part of the cityscape. So to have this back and restored, what did you do to get it fixed for its rededication?
To restore the clock, first of all, let me just kudos to the city and to the mayor for supporting all of this. We had monetary support from the Meade Witter Foundation, but all of that contribution was run through the city, and the city did a lot of administration, and they helped immensely on this project. But the nuts and bolts of how the clock was restored is, first of all, we had to find a clock restorer, and Rory DeMessi is one of maybe 5 or 6 people in the United States who can do this kind of work and do it to the quality that would be factory new condition, which it is. He first came to Wisconsin Rapids and took the clock completely apart, took it out in pieces because it was up in the tower, and so I was involved in that, and to see those frames come out, and he lowered them down just with a rope. It's all manual labor because the space is so small. Then he took it to his shop in Minneapolis, and he reworked all the parts. He remachined them, relubricated them, put in new bearings where it was needed. All of the gears were machined and then repainted, and he's just an expert on these ancient clocks. The Howard Company always painted them in a certain way with certain colors, and so he did that exactly as it would have been from the factory. So it's completely restored, completely new. Everything has been lacquered. Everything is completely up to factory condition.
Wow. And how long did that process take?
Well, he had the clock for a little more than a year.
Because that's meticulous work.
It is. We went over to his shop at one point, and I'm telling you, his shop isn't much bigger than this room, and he's got 5 or 6 clocks under construction there, and lots of big machinery and lathes and other machining tools, and it's just amazing to watch him work and to talk with him and understand how much he knows about these clocks and their history, and he works on clocks all over the country, so he knows them well.
Paul, what's been your reaction since the restoration work? Now that
Well, it was unbelievable. It's so nice now because originally we had to crank the weights up. And in the beginning, that was fine. Everybody, the people that were going to do it were enthused. They'd go once a week and crank these weights up. And that lasted about a month. And then they got tired of it. So what are we going to do? So I had to make a Mickey Mouse contraption that would wind the clock, but it operated every 12 minutes. And it was just stuff I bought in the hardware that I had to connect up to this thing.
This is Jerry again. I have to interrupt. Paul is just the most clever person in terms of building things that work and work simply. I have to say that.
The problem is with the 12-minute interval, if we had a power failure, the clock definitely was going to stop. Now, the new electric winds will go for 8 or 9 hours, so it's going to be a whole new ball game. But then, as far as the chime goes, I hooked an electric motor up to that, so we didn't need any weights for that. But, of course, that's all been junked because that's exactly what it ended up being after all these years. I'm amazed that it stood up that long.
You don't give yourself enough credit, Paul, in how you construct this stuff. It stand the test of time.
You know, what's interesting, though, is that Bill Huffman, we used to run the newspaper when we had a big thing.
you used to own this radio station.
Yeah, down in the radio station. And Bill Huffman looked at that clock tower and he said, you know, Paris has got their Eiffel Tower. He said, Wisconsin Rapids has got the clock tower. And for a short time, they actually included the clock tower in their masthead on the paper.
Really?
And,
I think I've seen some of the very old copies.
And I think that maybe we could, we're always looking for a way to get the town on the map, so to speak. Maybe we will have to adapt that process and go back to making the clock tower our Eiffel Tower.
How else there's been other improvements made, gentlemen, to make it a little easier to maintain?
Well, yes, that's true. I should say that the winders that are going to be put in, and they'll go in on Friday, are the major improvement to the clock mechanism itself. The clock is completely restored to its factory operating condition, but which was kind of what we were looking for, is that it operate the way an old clock like this should operate. The only thing that will be different is that it will have electric winders that pull the weights up, and then the clock runs the way the clock should run. It will chime with weights, and it will run with weights.
That will be nice to hear in downtown.
I think it will.
Chime, hear the chime again. Oh, it's the bottom of the hour, or it's the top of the hour. And it's good. Mayor, is it going to be lit at night, or what's the?
I'll let Jerry talk about that, but it had been lit previously, and I think the intention is to bring back the lighting.
By Friday again, the lights will go back on the exterior of the clock tower. There's going to be a new light in the dial. There was an old metal halide light up there, and that would have to be changed pretty often. And it tends to, it runs and then it dims, and then it goes out, and then you have to change it. But now it'll be an LED light, and that'll be dimmable, so we'll be able to adjust the brightness of the dials.
Oh, that'll be nice.
It should be beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be iconic in our downtown at night.
It really will be. I mean, it's kind of a nod to all of our efforts to bring vitality and people downtown. And I think the unique thing with the clock tower and this whole process is taught. I hear people, my age that weren't part of the era that was, when they built the structure and when they dedicated it originally. that they really didn't understand the history. I mean, there is just even that lack of recognition of kind of the city's history of, this tale of two cities, so to speak, and having that dynamic, and then the city halls being torn down and kind of combined through the city combining. And I think that's the neat part of what this clock and the clock tower represents, is just so much of the city's history. The location obviously is key too. The fact that it's on the banks of the Wisconsin River, our most beautiful natural asset in the city, and to have this thing fully restored, not just aspects of it, but from top to bottom, inside and out, restored, is really an awesome thing for the city.
And I hear we're going to have a proper rededication ceremony.
Yes, so we've got, as soon as these folks finish up, they've been working, as you can hear, diligently. Every day I see Jerry or Paul or somebody out walking around, or Phil Brown, who's also on the committee, walking around the clock tower, it seems, as well as Chad Worrell, who locally worked on, from Shopmaster, worked on the project. Those folks have been in and out of that tower for all of the last year and a half, 2 years. I mean, it was funny, in 2014, Paul called me up and said, hey, you got to, I hear there's been some discussion, I think it was at the Park and Recreation Commission, wanting to earmark some monies out of the city parks fund to do some recaulking and things. And that's kind of what kicked off the discussion, from what I recall. And Paul said, come meet me at the clock tower. And here Paul opens it up and he climbs up the clock tower. And I thought, oh man, I'm pretty, slim and limber. I can get up there and climb. Well, Paul's up to the top of the clock tower before I knew it, and here I'm, it's just a neat reflection of that project. But so next Thursday, the 28th of September here, we're going to be rededicating the clock tower in Paul Gross's honor. So a very fitting rededication for Paul's ability to tell our city's history in so many forms, far beyond just this project that he was personally very interested in. So from 5 to 7 p.m. at the base of the clock tower, or in the parking lot across from there, the Triangle, I guess, property, we're going to be set up to do a formal rededication of the tower, acknowledge all of the folks that were involved in the project, from the vendors to these folks and sponsors. And so we're very pleased to have that moment and celebrate that moment, because, as I mentioned, a lot of folks drive by and don't necessarily understand the history or the appreciation. So to pause and tell that story and really make the community aware of it is truly exciting and once in a lifetime for many of us.
Paul, what's your thoughts? It's going to be rededicated in your honor. I
am uncomfortable with that. There were so many people involved. It just, and I was just thinking this morning, those marble slabs that have all the names on, that marble, in case nobody knows it, that marble came off of the Daily Drugstore building when they tore it down.
Oh, really?
I had worked at Daly's for many, many years, and when they were going to tear that down, I went to the guy that was taking it down, and I asked him, can I buy that marble? Well, he said, somebody ought to buy it. He says, it's just going to be laying here. And so I bought that marble. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. It was in storage. And then when we were trying to raise money for the clock tower, it dawned on me one day, geez, why don't I give them those marble slabs and we can sell names on them? And I approached Jerry on it, and I said, well, we can locate these around in the property. It'll be beautiful. Jerry says, we can't do that. Now, why not? He says, it'll look like a cemetery. He said, we have to have a wall. And that's where it all came from.
Okay. Wow.
Fascinating.
It's such a neat part of our history. And it's you guys have to feel a lot of gratitude toward the community for embracing this.
Well, yes, absolutely. Without support of a lot of people, we would not be doing this, and that's for sure. I should mention that it's almost a joy to climb up in the tower at this point. The old ladders have been taken out, the old platforms have been taken out, and unfortunately this is a part of the tower that people won't see, but it's gorgeous. And Chad Worrell and his dad Tom have erected all of the platforms, replaced all of the ladders, replaced the ladder up into the dial house, which was unsafe, and now they have a safety harness that goes on that ladder. It's an amazing transformation that has been made.
How tall is the tower officially, or how many stories equivalent?
It's 54 feet.
Okay.
So
you can see it from almost so many areas of the city. And it's, like I said, it's a part of our quote-unquote skyline.
Yeah, very much so true.
And now that's getting this rededicated I think you hit it right. It's symbolic with the Triangle project right nearby, and it's right across from our paper-making history on the river there. So how do you want, Paul, how do you want this tower to be remembered or used in the future?
Well, I guess it's mostly the memory of where it was in the first place, in the old City Hall at First and Baker.
What about you, Jerry?
Well, I agree with Paul. It kind of sums up some of the history of the city and the history that shouldn't be lost. And it has an audible and visual importance in the city. So it reminds us of where we've been, where we've come from. And the mayor's sitting here, and I just have to say, we need to be taken to different places, but we came from someplace too.
That's right. And put the same question to you.
I think in many of the same ways, but I think it also, as Paul had indicated, sort of in the history of even the newspaper using it as a moniker and things, I think we've utilized it in some fashions, but there are ways for the city to utilize that as a landmark, as a place of gathering. When you're at the clock tower, you kind of wonder what its history was, and I think it kind of poses that question for people if they're enjoying the recreational trails or the sites of the riverfront.
Well, I think it could be one of the tourist stops. Here's an iconic piece of Wisconsin Rapids history. You should see it. It's beautiful. And some way or other have information there or at the CVB or someplace where people can understand why that tower is so important to this city.
That's right.
It's also a good location for a sky cam if we ever...
There you go. And I bet you could rig that up, Paul.
I bet you could. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, congratulations. A lot to you and everybody who worked on this project.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the rededication and to taking walks downtown or by the river and hearing those. The chime again, and going, she's alive and well, the old clock tower.
So join us for the rededication the 28th of September. Remarks will be at 5:30 p.m. With the reception from 5 to 7.
And the reception will be right across the street?
Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for a wonderful gift. And thank you, Paul. You might not think
we got to do is repair all the sidewalks around there because they're right on. Water must be getting underneath through the wall, and
another project.
That's the next project.
That and being able to see the rapids, right, Paul? We've got to get that project done with the tree clearing out in the riverbed. It's obstructed the view, and Paul and I have long talked about that.
He's talked to me about it.
Okay.
So you're getting the word out. Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of the Morning Magazine, and again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll take our first break here on the Morning Magazine.
Good morning and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thanks again, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome Jesse from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, who's here for the entire show, and you can view the broadcast, the high-definition cable cast on your local cable system or on their fine website, which is available 24/7, and I think I don't have it here on my sheet, but the reason why Jesse's here is Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here. And now it's time to talk some city business, Common Council night last night. Let's talk about the item that was the hot item, the term of your office. You decided, hey, I'm not going to break a tie on a vote on an amendment to make it a 3-year term. And you said, folks, it's time for the council to debate this issue and come up to some kind of a solution. We're one of the few cities, I've checked around too, that has a 2-year mayor. Most are 4 or at least 3. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on this whole thing?
Well, it does put me in a unique position because, alderpersons have a tendency to look to the incumbent and me in the room and say, well, he's done a great job, or he's done an okay job. That's not what this is about, right? This is about how long you want your mayor to serve, and how I think in many respects how advanced you want that person to lead change. And I think when you look at incrementally, this city has changed very slowly. And I think some of it can be attributed to the ability of the chief executive to think long-term and long-range. And so while you could read into that and say, well, he's advocating for a 4-year term, well, could be. As a private citizen, I'd like our mayor to be focused long-term, to be investing in a future, and to really make sort of bold commitments to the future. And I think I'm in my term in office, and I've knowing that it was a 2-year term,
right,
and fully accepting that when I ran the last 3 times for re-election, you really have to accelerate and put in the extra time and the effort to move things forward in a very short fashion, because 4 months of that 8-month really, or 18-month time frame is going to be spent campaigning. Not 100% of your time, because you can't. You have to be in the office, you have to administer and run the city, but you have a 4-month distraction of a campaign. And I think that's why you'll see majority of cities around the state, around the country even, that have strong mayor forms of government, where the mayor is the chief executive and the chief elected official that's administering the city, serve a 4-year term. And so, unfortunately, the council, and no disrespect to those folks, they're on a part-time basis. They have lives and things to do too. But I don't believe the council's really sat down and had an informed debate and discussion about it. So I was pleased with the council's decision to refer it to a committee of the whole. Have me out of the room,
Sure.
Have an informed debate and discussion. Perhaps bring somebody in that can help facilitate discussion, so that way you're representing both sides of the issue. But I don't know how, I honestly it doesn't affect my intentions whether or not I'm running for re-election or not. I do think for the sake of the city, this issue should be considered and debated. A 3-year term creates a strange dynamic of election cycles, and you're going to have such a low turnout unless you have a very contested race. I mean, the reality is, I believe you'll draw a stronger candidate pool if you have a 4-year term, because you're expecting people, if they're working professionals, to step away from their commitments in their lives to run the city. And I think if like I would suggest, we want working professionals, we want folks that are in the workforce, or that really have ideas and have the energy and have the time to be able to invest in the job. And I think that's why it lends itself to having a 4-year term, no different than every other city around us that has a strong mayor form of government.
Okay, so is the goal to get this settled so that the next mayoral election, it will be a 4-year term or whatever?
Well, Alderperson Dolan made the referral, and I was actually quite surprised that he made the referral at the end of a meeting so close to the next election. Ideally, they should be debating this immediately following
I was going to ask you about
election,
that,
because it creates a dynamic for the incumbent like myself for some to feel it's a litmus test on his or her success or accomplishments or whatever, which is not fair or not right. It really should be about how long do we want that person to serve in office. There are mechanisms. If you get a mayor that isn't performing maybe the way the electorate wants, there's recall processes and things. But the reality is it should be done, and it should have been done after the term. But I think they can have an informed discussion in 3 months before the December 1st filing, or when people can officially file and take out nomination papers. So I don't know. I don't really have an expectation. I didn't have an expectation really before the discussion, other than don't just passively say, well, I don't know what we should do, or we should put it out to referendum. Well, that doesn't solve the issue, because you're not going to be able to inform the electorate on the pros and cons. It's you're elected by your people and in representative form of democracy to be able to have the debate and discussion at a city council level. So to do a up or down vote of your constituents isn't going to solve the issue.
No.
In fact, it's going to draw a lot more misinformation and falsehoods than factually being informed at a council debate.
So now President Dolan,
Mm-hmm.
President, Common Council President Terry Dolan will call us a committee of the whole. And for
Right.
folks wondering what that is, that means the council meets as a committee of the whole, and the common council president chairs the meeting. As you have said, you're not going to even be at the meeting.
That's my intention, and they can ask for my input. I'm happy to share it, but at this point in time, it's really an issue that the council has to debate because they're the ones that are ultimately going to vote on a charter ordinance making a change or not.
We're talking about the downtown with the clock and bell tower. Your reaction to the announcement about the mall and the YMCA Boys and Girls Club project.
That was quite an announcement. Long time in the coming. I think folks. I think back to my time when I got involved in downtown revitalization efforts back in 2002. So 15 years ago, and then when I opened my business in 2003, that I never thought, Walmart had just left, so there was a lot of vacancy happening throughout the downtown. The mill had just sold the first time, and waves of job loss were happening. And I never would have thought we would have gotten to the day 15 years later that the mall would be torn down and a YMCA Boys and Girls Club sitting in its place. But I guess the writing was on the wall, one could say, because you had a change in mall ownership, as well as the national dynamics of regional malls. When a newer mall gets built, it pulls from the old mall. And, think about the regional mall that exists in Appleton. How many years, 40 years ago, the Rapids Mall was the regional mall that served the communities. And today, those regional malls are drawing from hours away. And we saw what happened with the Stevens Point Mall. We see what's happening in Wausau, Marshfield. They're all very different dynamics because the communities are different. But I would say that I'm very excited about the redevelopment of that property. It's going to obviously change the look and the feel of the area, but it'll also bring about something that all of us back in 2002 or 96 or whenever those groups were assembled, they never saw a traffic generator such as a renewed traffic generator like the mall did in 40 years ago, like the YMCA Boys and Girls Club will hope to do in part with their development there.
Now, that development, how much of the mall will be left? Is it the Centralia Center is going? I understand because that was a major. That's going to stay.
The Centralia Center will stay. JCPenney, the former JCPenney, will stay. The VA clinic will stay for a period of time until they're able to be relocated into the mall property within the redevelopment. But it's our understanding as of now, the rest of the structure will be demolished. So the Boys and Girls Club, tentatively, as of today, will site in the former JCPenney, with the YMCA Aquatic Center to be situated sort of southwest of that building. So essentially where kind of behind the VA and where the core of the mall sits today. And then the VA, again, tentatively is proposed between the Centralia Center and the back side of the mall existing kind of behind the former Yonkers.
Now, I know the one shop was already planning, had outgrown their space out there. I think that's the Bethesda. But what's going to happen to the other, what's being done to try and assist the other businesses affected by this?
Community Development Director Adam and I have met with a number of the mall tenants who have requested discussions about what resources might exist. I know the Chamber of Commerce has also participated in some of those discussions to share what revolving loan fund, low interest loan funds and other resources that might be available. We're also talking about possibly putting together a relocation package. Many of these folks are small businesses, and the mall, because of the decline in traffic, hasn't been a very friendly place to be. I'll just put it out there, and I think those folks are kind of now with the announcement behind us are feeling, gosh, maybe there is a better place for me to be located that offers more visibility or more traffic. And so I think that's the exciting part is those folks that do want to relocate have been talking with property owners and landlords around the city about relocation, but it's going to be costly for some of them. And so we want to see what we can do to help relocate the tenants if possible.
One of the things you mentioned about these type of malls in general have become passé.
Yeah.
People like to drive up, go in, and come out. They don't want to walk through a long mall. I mean, that's the Quick Trip model. That's how Quick Trip has made their name.
Convenience, right?
Convenience. Drive in, I get my milk, I get my whatever. I'm in and out. I don't have to, walk way back there. So how do you view this as fitting in overall to the downtown redevelopment? This new hybrid facility?
Well, we had done a market study just to do a high-level analysis. How much retail space can our market support? You know, you didn't mention online, but online that's the major disruption, right? That's where Plover, you know, which is heavily invested in commercial real estate, such as retail like this, that's going to be a unique dynamic or interesting dynamic to watch in 5 years or sooner, because the online revolution is a steamroller that's moving ever fast. You know, when you can order groceries online, I mean, if you're in a grocery business, there might be some impact there too. But I do think how it fits into the downtown plan is, number one, it brings more foot traffic and a new user group, but we also identified that we don't have a need for the amount of commercial retail space that was built out. I mean, think when we had 2 shopping malls, we had the Shopko Plaza Mall and we had the Rapids Mall. Right. How long ago has the Shopko Mall in its previous form been gone? For a lot of years, right? And so I think you know, they converted that obviously to some civic space with the Woodlands or Crossview Church, and then some of the retail space. But the reality is, you know, this fits very well in our downtown plan to bring people downtown, to keep them downtown. So things like the farmers market, we're identifying where might that be better located, how could that be improved and better supported. So there's a lot of I think positive disruption that's happening as a result of the sale of the impending sale of the Rapids Mall.
What about the Triangle Project?
Triangle Project. So this, we believe there's some interdependence actually between the YMCA development, Boys and Girls Club development, and our Triangle Project. So we've, as we talked previously, Gorman and Company, we continue to discuss the project with them. Our intent is to put market rate housing at that site, and to the extent that maybe we could offer YMCA memberships to the young professionals or empty nesters or retirees that are living in the apartment complex or condos downtown. You know, and so actually the dynamic with the YMCA Boys and Girls Club siting at the mall strengthens, I believe, the Triangle Project. And so I think that's very exciting from that standpoint, that there is interdependence. Folks that want to be active and want to have a lifestyle that things are close to them, kind of the convenience aspect. Housing is a major component to that. And I believe that by citing the YMCA Boys and Girls Club, the Triangle, as well as some of the other downtown, just the kind of the reemployment in the river block and things, there's more people working downtown today, and so in effect, there's more people that want to live downtown.
Okay. How? What's the schedule for that with that company?
So we're still analyzing development to the extent that what's the number of people that are willing to occupy a development, because the developer is not going to speculatively build that project. They're not going to just put it up and
not like a spec house. No,
exactly. This is not a spec project. So we have to quantify the demand. So we're going to be talking with potentially the users of the YMCA. Now that the YMCA is going to be located downtown, would you be willing to live downtown? Or folks that are working at the courthouse or at the paper company or even at the river block, are you interested in living downtown? I mean, there's a ton of professional offices downtown that are in, whether it's the Schreiber Building or all the others that are scattered throughout downtown, you know, Wood Trust Bank. There's a lot of employment downtown, and so we're going to begin discussions with those employers to identify people that are interested in living downtown, and then ultimately, what's their threshold? What's their ability to afford certain things downtown? If we're not going to go to subsidized affordable housing, can we get it done with market rate? We believe we can. So does the developer. It's going to require some subsidy, whether it's TIF, incentives by putting in a TIF district where we can capture the tax increment that'll be generated by the development and put that back into things like underground parking. There will be a need for subsidy. This project is uncommon for markets like ours, and it's going to require some additional investment from the city or other local banks to help bridge the gap.
And then you have the other major announcement involving the cultural center, the old Epson's property. A benefactor of the cultural, supporter of the cultural center, has bought that land, and that they're planning to build their new cultural center, a permanent home for them.
That's a very exciting project too. You know, a lot of folks, we see a lot of vacancy where businesses have their life cycles have ended, or there's the buildings that are obsolete really for other users, and that's a unique one because that property is fairly large. It's close to downtown. It's close to the riverfront. It's very visible and accessible. I spent the weekend in Door County this last weekend, and there is so much to be had in by way of arts and culture in Door County that I thought if we can get a sliver of some of those dynamics in our community, and they do exist in pockets, but to have a site that promotes maybe a sculpture garden or promotes a wine facility, you know, there's just so many things that can be brought into a cultural center like that, and you know, it's fun. It draws people. I mean, I was a visitor. I spent my weekend. I spent money there. So the extent that cultural center could play a role in our visitor dynamic is something that I believe will be possible with a site that affords them larger space.
Yeah, and then you got a fine work of art called the Clock and Bell Tower.
Right down the yes, right. Great inspiration for those that might be painting a piece or something for sure.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and then I want to get the latest on aquatics from our mayor. You're listening to The Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. And welcome back to the Morning Magazine, our monthly discussion with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. We got a caller, so let's get to our caller. Hopefully they wanted to talk to you and not on over the back fence. Good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine. I heard a click. So that means Over the Back Fence starts at 11:06, gang. And no, you can't call before that show starts. I knew that was going to happen.
We talked about housing, obviously downtown, but you know, we continue to look at ways to promote new housing stock in the city. One such project that was approved last night was the development that'll be at 16th and Pepper.
I was going to ask you about that.
And next to the YMCA. 48 townhouse units will be constructed there starting this fall. They'll be online next spring. So we approved their site plan last night and ensured that the buildings look, don't look like just a multifamily apartment house or apartment complex. So we believe that it's landscaped very nicely and that it'll be a nice addition to that district of the city.
And it's right next to the football stadium, the hockey arena, and the Performing Arts Center. It's near 8th Street, so I would think it would be a popular
That's right. I think it's a walkable location as well, and that's something that residents and new residents look for is how walkable is your community, and obviously our downtown development lends itself naturally to it, but we believe this development too.
You touched on it a little bit, but with this growing online shopping, what is that going to do to cities?
Well, I think we're in a good position because we don't have a dramatic presence of retail in our community, which is a good thing. I think a lot of folks measure our community's success wrongly. I'll say wrongly on do we have this store or that store or this store. That wave is going away, and I don't care if it's now or in 5 years. It's going to look dramatically different, and so that would hurt our tax base tremendously if we had been heavily invested in retail. We saw what it was like to be heavily invested in industrial and how challenging that can be when the decline in that industry happens. So you really have to have a diversified base, and so I think retail, I'm not worried about it. I mean, I would love to have certain stores or certain businesses just like the next resident, but the reality is I'd rather have them be successful than open up and have to close because there just isn't the market or the online competition's too strong. I mean, MC Sports, prime example. That chain didn't have an online presence. What happened to them? They went bankrupt.
Yeah, the whole company. It wasn't
Despite
just
their store here being one of the most successful stores in their 1,000+ stores, and the landlord told me that, and so it was just strong information that if they don't have a good business model, they're not going to survive.
Yeah, I mean, I can go on. Say, for instance, I'm a golf enthusiast. If I was going to buy golf equipment right now, quite honestly, I'm going online first because I can find some better deals and I can order exactly what I want, my specs, et cetera, and have it delivered right to my house.
Exactly.
I mean, and that's the dynamic that's happening. So you wonder what will retail look like in the future? What type of retail will survive? And what does that mean for cities and their tax bases?
Oh, it means a lot, and I think you've seen some of the legislation that's coming from the state about trying to preserve tax base and not to avoid tax shift, because a lot of these retailers are playing the game that they're trying to improve their bottom line so they can compete against online. So they're filing lawsuits or contesting their property value assessments, and they're wanting a reduction because they believe their property isn't worth anything if it were vacant, or it should be assessed based upon if it were a vacant store, and that's unfair. It's unfair to us as residential taxpayers and everyone else as well.
What about aquatics? First off, how has the splash pad gone, and maintenance? Is it being respected? Are the kids being nice?
Yeah.
With the
So far, I get a couple of comments from people once in a while about sanitation and certain accidents happening there.
I bring that up because I heard from one mom goes, "There's some people that aren't watching their kids."
That's right.
And,
yeah. But generally, I'll tell you, we were blessed. 90-degree weather in late September. Who would have thought that we would have opened on September 1st and been able to at least enjoy it for the 2.5 weeks we've had, and this weekend looks great for another bit of enjoyment, or even later this week. So that's very exciting. I think the community says we love it. That ones that have told me we love it, but we still need a place to swim. And so I believe that, we talked about it at the city council, with the city council last week, just to update on schedule and where fundraising and where our efforts are. So if folks are interested in helping the city realize that project and join with the community members, we are going to put together a capital campaign committee that will effectively be charged with the outreach and marketing and fundraising for that project. So contact me, contact my office. We'd love to have any individual that is passionate about that project be a part of the committee to effectively make it happen.
Are you getting some folks?
We've got some folks identified that may not come forward, that you kind of have to go to them and say, would you be interested? So if they're listening, we might be coming for them, but we hope that those folks will see this as an opportunity to put in some time and give back and really make it, as we talked about the clock tower, kind of a generational impact. This project will last 40 plus years, and so to be a part of that from inception is pretty cool, and a once in a lifetime, and we hope that people of all ages will step up to the plate.
I was recently in Hartford, one of the communities that you visited, and that one is promoted. As it has a name, I think it's Veterans, whatever.
Yeah, Veterans Memorials.
And it's promoted in their tourism literature as here's something you want to check out when you're in Hartford.
Yes.
There's no reason that couldn't happen here.
Absolutely. Fully agree. And, there isn't a like-size facility proposed in any of the communities from here to Wausau. And so it really will be a regional destination from the north and from the south and east and west. So we're excited about that.
Anything else before I let you go? We've gone through a lot.
We have. We've gone through the majority of, I think, everything we've talked about. The 25th and Alton, back to housing just briefly, the 25th and Alton project will get a proposal from community development about single-family home development just south of here for that housing project. And then the other piece is put a plug in for the library's solar celebration this afternoon.
Hopefully the storms stay away.
Yeah, the largest solar installation in our area. So we're very excited about celebrating that launch and informing the community about what that was all about to occur.
Yeah, and that begins at 3
o'clock, yeah, with a little program at 3:30.
Yeah, and then if you want, and if the weather will cooperate, you'll get a chance to climb up to the roof to actually see the panels.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. You walk around there, and it's hard to believe that those panels can capture that much energy from the sun, right? And why aren't we doing more of it? And I think, we're going to continue to look at other projects throughout the city, public and private both, that can both sell electricity back to the grid, like the library will too.
Well, the Viking Company from Minnesota, that gentleman is a native of this area.
That's right. He's a graduate from Lincoln High School.
So he started his company, and he used mid-state technical students in their energy program.
Mm-hmm. It's a great story. When I did my tour with the library director before it went live, when they were installing it, and I recognized some faces, and I said, "Aren't you at Midstate?" He said, so he hired all local talent to help install. I mean, what a cool project for Midstate students who are going to school for renewable energy. There's an economy that can be built around that, and it would be great, for federal subsidies and such to remain in existence to help promote local job growth, such as renewable energy.
And let's think of the future and not the past.
Yeah. But when you're beholden to old energy models, it's incredibly difficult to.
Yeah, the world's changing, but back in the day, there was folks that wanted to protect the horse and buggy makers, and we know what that ended up like. Okay, Your Honor, as always, we appreciate the hour, and thank you for bringing our special guest to talk about the clock and bell tower.
Absolutely.
Look forward to that rededication.
Thanks, Carl.
And with that, and thank you, Jesse, for being here as well with Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com.